Sup everyone, welcome back to Reddit Roundup. Today we bring you r/ProRevenge, where OP gets tormented for years so he'll make sure his bully doesn't go to college. I'm gonna warn you now, this is a long story. For the backstory, I moved across the US from California to Pittsburgh when I was in the 3rd grade. Right from the first day of school, Rob decided he hated my guts for whatever reason and bullied me. He'd steal my lunch, push me, and really do whatever he could to torment me. Rob had a lot of friends throughout the grade. He was able to turn a lot of people against me, and soon he could sit back and relax and have his minions bully me for him. It was hell. Even people who weren't friends with Rob were afraid of him, fearing he'd do the same thing to them as what they were doing to me. Because of this, pretty much everyone would avoid me. Sometimes people would bully me just to make sure Rob wouldn't plan anything against them. And I couldn't retaliate either because, again, there were a lot of kids wrapped around his finger, and then they would all come after me. It took me a few tries to realize that lesson. This went on for 7 years. It went in a cycle. Everyone would bully me for a while, start to lay off a bit. I'd then start retaliating, thinking, oh, it was just a few kids I'd have to fight off. And then they'd beat the poop out of me. And then everyone would bully me again, and the cycle would repeat. Quick side note, my parents couldn't just move away. They weren't dirt poor, but they were pretty close. Almost all of their money went into the mortgage, and were left with just enough for essentials. Selling the house with this much left on the mortgage would put us without any profit. We'd be homeless, so I just had to deal with it. The plan. Q to midway through sophomore year, I was sick of it. I had scars all over me from the bullying, and it was just still going on. I was sick of it. I was sick of Rob. I was sick of the kids. I was sick of hurting all the time. I was sick of my low self-esteem and depression. This is when I started to plan. I couldn't just retaliate in any normal way. At this point, Rob had hundreds of kids on his side. What did I have? Patience. All the tormenting, the beating, they had trained me for all these years. They were about to be the fugitive, of course, the death of me. By now, it had been years since Rob had directly bullied me himself, but he had indirectly doing it still, making people hate me. This made the plan easier. I tried to start getting Rob on my side, which unluckily for me meant basically being his servant. It took a while, but it started working. The bullying slowed down, but it didn't go away completely. But this wasn't my only goal. I didn't just want the bullying to stop. I wanted to ruin his life. So here I was, an angry, vengeful high school sophomore who had just gotten my main bully on my side. I got him to trust me. Part 1 complete. Now, part 2. So from the beginning, there were many bullies, but 4 main ones aside from Rob. Joe, Mo, Poe, and Ultimate. He wasn't even deserving of a name capitalized. Now, on to his friends. Now I had to try and turn them against Rob. This part was easier than it seemed. Turns out they were also sick of him and just stayed his friend to prevent him from bullying them like I was. It still wasn't easy. Joe and Poe were very easy to manipulate. They wanted any way out of being his friend. I didn't tell them the plan wouldn't take place for another couple of years, so they'd still have to be his friend. Mo wasn't as easy. He saw what everyone did to me for almost a decade. He didn't want to risk anything. I told him as long as he kept his mouth shut, everything would be fine. He reluctantly agreed. Ultimate, on the other hand, wanted no part. In fact, the only reason I didn't tell Rob, aside from being actually screwed, I have no doubt about that, is because Mo, Joe, Poe had already agreed and Ultimate still had some loyalty to them. Ultimate almost blew our cover many times. It took until the end of junior year to even promise not to tell Rob. So he wasn't on board, fine. He chose his fate with Rob. Now to put the plan into action. Q2 toward the end of senior year, where people start applying for college. I had known for a long time exactly which universities Rob and Ultimate wanted to go to. They had okay grades, which made our plan even bigger of a role. Rob said he wanted to major to become a school nurse. Since his major involved working with children, colleges he applied to wanted to reach out to friends and family to make sure he works well with the little ones. This is how our plan would work. It was very, very simple, but if played right, could destroy his life. Anyways, all of us, me, Mo, Poe, and Joe, had secretly been recording a lot of what Rob had been doing and saying to us. Not only about the bullying and tormenting, which would have been way more than enough, but also about him boasting about how he'd been accepted anywhere because everyone loves him, and how he was second coming of Jesus and stuff like that. We all sent in reviews about him, how abusive he was, how manipulative, and also sent in hundreds of tape recordings for proof. Rob got all of his letters in the mail and invited Ultimate, Joe, Mo, Poe, and I, and many others to read the letters from the colleges. He wanted, and I'm quoting when I say this, everyone to see him in all his glory. He was arrogant. It was hilarious knowing he'd been rejected from everywhere while he didn't know. The way his face fell, letter after letter, watching the tears stream down his face, knowing his life had been ruined. He had never gotten a job. He was too lazy to even torture me himself. Why would he even lift a finger to ensure his future? He knew college would work out, and that his parents would fit the bill. The effects. After that, he took a year off from school to work and save up money to move out. And then he got scammed by an MLM. He applied for more colleges, and then all of us put our plans back into action. From there, he refused to get a job and his parents kicked him out. He spent a few years in Skid Row before cleaning himself up and getting a job finally. Last I heard, he is barely surviving working minimum wage at McDonald's. Too long didn't read. Kid turns everyone against me for nearly a decade. I gain his trust, his friends' trust, and turn them against him and ruin his life. He's barely surviving now.
I secretly trained my roommate to not respond to his morning alarms. I was in college, senior. My roommate was a sophomore, but it was his first time living in a dorm. He'd been a pretty lousy roommate, constantly left the room a mess, left his stuff on my side of the room and even on my bed. He stole my alcohol, and he used my stuff without permission. He never cleaned up my dishes after he used them, and a bunch of other stuff. I confronted him about all these issues on several different occasions, and I got the resident advisor involved with the alcohol stealing issue, because at the time he was under 21. Things still continued anyways. He asked me once if it was okay to bring a girl home to spend the night. I obviously said no. We were in the middle of a pandemic, plus that's weird if I was there. I also had to wake up every day at 8 for work, which he already knew. He would stay up playing video games till 2 a.m. some nights. Not to mention, he would set like 10 alarms in the morning with a bunch of different alarm tones. I finally hit my breaking point and decided to do something cruel. Every morning when I woke up, I'd observe his alarm pattern and see how he would respond. He had several different alarms that he totally ignored, with all the same sounds. He had a couple of half-hour alarms that had a unique sound but also ignored. And then the final alarm had its own sound too. All of these sounds were default iPhone sounds. So his brain had been trained to this alarm pattern for a while, which I assumed. So I started to set up one of his punishments. I set up a sequence of alarms on my phone identical to his sequence but an hour earlier. He responded to my alarms the exact same way he responded to his own. I kept this up for a week and his brain was eventually retrained to sleep through double the amount of alarms as before. Then phase 2 kicked in. Random inconsistencies in my alarm pattern. Some days I'd play all the alarms, while other days I'd only play one, and his brain was trained to ignore. That way, his brain expects to sleep through like 20 alarms and only hears 11. He slept through his alarms at least 4 times in 2 weeks. Eventually, he finally changed his alarm pattern so he'd only have one alarm, and he no longer had the energy to stay up till 2 a.m. TLDR, I physiologically tortured my roommate by throwing off his brain to respond to his alarm clock because he was stealing my booze and being a crappy roommate.
Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please give us a like. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to never miss an upload. Please follow us on Twitter at Reddit Roundup. Link will be in the description down below. And until next time, Pizzace Mafkers.